So a very, very good afternoon, everybody. I am, my name is Richie Prior. I'm in Mallorca, and welcome to this talk on La Liga. And I'm really, really pleased to welcome joining me on this particular show today, the legend that is Gerry Armstrong. Gerry, good afternoon.
Hi, Richie.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Now, for those of you who don't know, Gerry obviously played over here in Mallorca. Played for Real Mallorca. How many times? 55 times. Scored 13 goals for Real Mallorca in La Liga. And probably most famously known as the man that scored that goal for Northern Ireland in the 1982 World Cup finals against, of all people, Spain. Hey, Gerry.
Don't tell anybody in Valencia, though, Richie.
No, I heard you're not very popular in Valencia. So.
Well, I scored there for the national team in the World Cup in '82, and then about a year later, when I signed for Mallorca, we were losing 2-1 in Valencia, and I equalised in the same goal, so we got a 2-1 goal there.
Oh yeah, so you're not very popular then.
No, I don't think I was done too well that day, but we needed the points.
So we're going to touch on, listen, there are two more rounds of games to go in La Liga since La Liga restarted after the lockdown. So we're obviously going to touch on who's going to win the Liga Championship. Let's look at also, we're going to look at who's going to qualify for Champions League, who's going to qualify for Europa League, and probably more important to you and I, who's going to get relegated from La Liga. We'll talk about that in a bit. Also, do we want to touch on what's happening in La Liga 2, because that could be very interesting going into the last couple of games. And also Segunda B, which not many people talk about Segunda B, but I wanted to talk about Segunda B a little bit later on the show because there's an opportunity for 3 teams from the Balearics, where I'm situated right now, to go up into Segunda Division. So we'll talk about that a bit later. So after last night's result for Real Madrid, Gerry, they are flying right now. I mean, since the lockdown, everything sort of seems to have changed. I think it was, first of all, obviously Barcelona before the lockdown were looking like they were going to win the league, and all of a sudden, form's sort of taken a dip for Barcelona, and Real Madrid are the informed team, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I remember doing a radio show a few days before La Liga started, and I was looking into the teams and the squads of both Real Madrid and Barcelona, and I was a bit surprised that Barcelona only had 18 fit players 2 days before the start of the La Liga comeback, and the squad has gone from strength to strength with Real Madrid. You know, it's great to see Marco Asensio from Mallorca back in the squad after that bad injury with his knee, the cruciate injury, and he's scoring goals as well. Great left foot. It's good to see the Mallorca boys doing well.
Yeah, it is.
I knew the squad was better with Real Madrid than Barcelona, and I actually tipped Barcelona, who were 2 points ahead, to actually finish runners-up, and I said Real Madrid, in my opinion, will win the league. So it's looking like it's going to happen.
So what's gone wrong at Barcelona then? What is it? Is it that obviously they've changed the manager? There's talk that Messi doesn't get on with the manager. You know, what's going on there?
Well, I was never comfortable with Quique Setien being the manager at Barcelona, and of course, it was a little bit of an unrest there when he came. There was a lot of talk that Messi had been controlling, like who was going to be bought, and if he didn't like the player, that then all of a sudden Barcelona weren't interested in him. But I'm told that's not the case. I'm told, yes, he does have a certain amount of influence, but it's still down to the management, and of course the manager to who he signs. He signed Braithwaite, didn't he? You know, as a centre forward, because Suarez was injured for a long time, and he was well. The fact that the coronavirus was closed down for 2-3 months, he was able to get fit again, but they still didn't have a full squad and quota of players, and there's lots of players on the move. A lot of unrest about the director of football, because basically he had signed a lot of these players and they hadn't really fitted in. So there was unrest, and then there was talk about money problems as well, and that Messi was having to help pay some of the wages for some of the staff and things like that. I mean, it was crazy. But I know the players all took a cut in their wages because the club obviously were in need of some support. But you could see there was a lot of problems underneath it that were sort of starting to come through. Then they had a couple of draws initially. They had a couple of difficult games. They drew away to Sevilla, which was a 0-0 draw. That was 2 points drop. Of course, Real Madrid come straight back in, and they dropped more points. And Real Madrid's just been flying. They've got a great squad. They've got a lot of fit lads coming back. Benzema has closed the gap. He's on 19 goals now, Richie. And Messi is sitting on 22. So there's only 3 goals between them now with 2 games to go.
And in the case of someone like Griezmann, who's obviously a massive signing for Barcelona, they thought that Griezmann maybe take up the mantle of what Neymar was doing for them a couple of years ago. It hasn't really worked, has it, with the other two?
No, that was questioned as well about the fact that Kike Setien had him on the bench, and he was sitting on the bench, and then his family were commenting, "Why are you leaving a World Cup winner on the bench, French international? You're not playing him, you're not using him." So there was lots of questions. But then there was one game in particular, they were 2-1 up, and he made a couple of changes in the second half. And because he made the changes, Kike Setien, and they ended up drawing the match 2-2. The next day, apparently all over the press that the players were blaming him and having a go at him in the dressing room. Why did you change it for? We were 2-1 up. You changed it, we had the drop point. So you can see it wasn't harmony. It wasn't really what they wanted. So typical in La Liga and obviously Spanish football, there are problems that suddenly come to the fore, and then form goes out the window.
So we are now down, after last night's game, obviously Madrid beating Granada last night by 2-1. We're now down to 2 more games to go. 4 points clear, Real Madrid. They're playing home to Villarreal. Villarreal is obviously still scrapping for Europa League places, so it might be a game, but you'd have to fancy Real Madrid at home, wouldn't you?
You would. You'd fancy them any of the games because, they got 2 early goals last night and Benzema again on target. Do you know the interesting thing as well? Mendy, the fullback who scored the second, was their 21st goal scorer this season. That shows you the number of players that are contributing to scoring goals. So that's proof that their squad is a lot more extensive, and it's not a young Barcelona side anymore. I know Sergio Ramos isn't getting he's getting a little bit older, but he's still very reliable and dependent. But that Barcelona squad is aging, and I don't see an awful lot coming through that's going to improve it, and I'm not sure they've got the money to improve it as well.
I think that's going to be the problem for obviously most teams going into next year with the lockdown and everything else. But what's interesting, I think, also is Gareth Bale. What's going on there?
That's unbelievable. It's a love-hate thing with him in the press. He's been criticised for a long, long time by the fans and saying he doesn't speak good enough Spanish and he's not really conforming with the team. He doesn't mix with the other players. He's a bit of a loner. He's another 2 years left on his contract, and he said, "Look, I'll sit here and wait till my contract expires." Last summer, I remember doing a couple of games for Virgin Media, sitting on a game, and they were losing 2-0. It was in America, and they brought him on as a sub, and he scored a goal and made a goal, and they drew 2-2, and he was set to go the next day to a team in China, and it was a big deal. I think he was getting something like £1 million or €1 million a game, and he was set to sign the contract, and then the board said, "No, he's not going. We're not letting him go now. We need him," because they were so poor against Atletico Madrid, and they got beaten 5-1, and the team didn't look particularly good at that time. But listen, he contributed then, and they kept him, but it hasn't gone well since then. And I think sometimes the press can look for a reason. If they don't like it, they can look for a reason to pick on you. And I think that's what happened with Gareth Bale. He's not happy, but he said, "Look, I'll set it out for another 2 years and wait till my contract expires, and I'll walk away to wherever he wants."
So Real Madrid are playing Villarreal at home. Barcelona are playing Osasuna at home. I think if we were sort of had a Mallorca hat on, we'd actually probably like it to go to the last game of the season, because funnily enough, Real Madrid's last game is against Leganés, who are the team that are in the relegation places like Mallorca are. So it would make... Yeah, it is, and we'll talk about the relegation in a second. But obviously, I think Madrid just want to get it done, and I can't really see them not doing it against Villarreal, right?
No, I agree with you. I think Real Madrid will win it. Obviously, the fact that they, with a game to go, and they can go out and enjoy the last game and not worry about it. I think also they've got a superior head-to-head against Barcelona. So even if it went down to a draw and needing a win in the last game to actually do it, or even draw the last game, I think they could still win it.
That's interesting, because obviously that doesn't, like in the Premier League, it obviously goes on goal difference. But in La Liga, it goes on how you've done against the team. You finished on the same points. Exactly. So and obviously there's no loser there. Well, there's a loser, which is Barcelona. So I don't think it's going to happen. I think you're right. I think it's just going to go down to the last game will be a sort of a non-entity really, which might not be good for Mallorca. Let's just quickly touch on obviously the other Champions League places, because I think I'm right in saying that right now both Atletico Madrid and Sevilla are done. They're into Champions League places. It's the top four, and nobody can catch them now. So I think you'd have to say a bit of a disappointing season for Atletico Madrid. I mean, obviously they're still in the Champions League, but league-wise, they haven't really sort of. There've been a few complaints with the manager and the tactics and stuff like that. I've got friends of mine here in Mallorca that are Atletico Madrid fans are not happy with how the manager's playing, his team. Would you say disappointing? I mean, finishing third is not bad, but but as far as they're concerned, what would you reckon?
Well, Simeone, for starting, won't be happy finishing third. He's always been a winner. I remember when I started doing La Liga in 1996, he was the captain of the double winning team, that was so successful under Radomir Antic. And, he's always been a winner. He won't be happy. But you've got to look, they lost a lot of their players last year. They let a lot of them go. They were getting their own age. And he's replaced 3 out of the back 4. So it's going to take them a little while to bed in. So I'm looking at that. The big problem for me, though, is they let Griezmann go. And Griezmann had scored over 50% of their goals and had been involved in the build-up for a lot of their other goals. So with him leaving, they've lost a real striker. And they spent their money maybe not so wisely on an attacking midfield player for 127 million from Benfica. I think they really have to look at how they're going to improve next year. I think Morata is okay. He's a centre forward. He's done all right. But they've got 2 similar type players up. Whether he plays the 2 of them together, and he has tried. I think he's still trying to find out his best formation. But next year, I'm expecting better things from Atletico Madrid.
But also with that boy, João Felix, you know about him. You've heard about him from an early age, haven't you?
Yeah, I knew about him when he was 17. I offered him to Manchester City, Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Tottenham, all of the major clubs. And they were told about him by Nuno Gomes, who was director of football, good friend of mine, and he said, this is the best 17-year-old I've ever seen. He said, he's fantastic. He can score goals. He's got great pace. He's got skill and technique and balance. And he is exciting, but he's still very young. To pay 127 million for a 19-year-old was a lot of money. He's not a prolific goal scorer. That's the other thing. He'll create goals and he'll score maybe 6 or 7 or 8 goals a season, but he's not going to be a 20-goal a season man like Griezmann was. So I think that's where they have to sort of try and work out the balance again for future reference.
How's it turned out for Tierney? Obviously, we've probably forgotten about Kieran Tierney. He's gone off to Spain, but I hear he's learning the language. He's settled in quite well. He's in and out the team, but seems to be doing okay.
Yeah, but listen, there's lots of different players who have come to La Liga, and over the period of time. I remember when I played for Mallorca, it took me at like 3 to 6 months to learn the language and to settle in and communicate with my teammates. But I was coming from a different league, and for me, coming from a British league to the Spanish league, where it was a lot more technical, it took me a wee while to understand that and how it works. So the year after I joined, I had the likes of Steve Archibald and Gary Lineker contacted me to say, how can we find out, what the best way is? And I explained to them, look, the first thing you got to do is learn the language. You've got to understand your teammates. And if you can't communicate, it's going to make it a lot more difficult. So they understood that. I had the same thing with I think I said the same to Gareth Bale. I have to say the same with Gareth Bale. I did the same with David Beckham when he contacted me, and I told him the same. And he used to keep in touch because I was commentating on virtually every game in La Liga then, and I knew the ins and outs of most of the teams and had a good eye for some of the players who were coming through in development. But Spain has been a brilliant ground for developing young talent. You look at what Pep Guardiola has done at Manchester City, the number of Spanish players he's brought over, and then of course the Spanish managers have also made the trip over to the Premier League, which is where the big money is. And of course, it's most of the managers. There's very few English, British managers in the Premier League now. Most of them are foreign.
Would it be said that Lopetegui at Sevilla has had a good season after obviously he's sacking from the Spanish job? That's been a pretty good start for him, right?
Yeah, he had a disaster. I mean, I don't know what sort of thought he had when he actually decided that he was going to pack in the international team on the eve of a World Cup. I mean, whoever conceived that was wrong, and obviously Real Madrid played a huge part in that, and which I didn't think was really good at the time. I thought it was very poor in the way they went about it. But anyway, he lost a year or so of his career. Now he's back in there again, and it'll do him no harm. Obviously, having a good season with Sevilla. He's a good coach, and he's got hunger, which is what you want, and he's looking to try and take it forward. But listen, everybody's going to look at Real Madrid with their squad, and you look at the squad and you go, that's the best squad. He's got loads of quality there, whether Bale stays or not, and who they buy. They're all looking to see who they can buy and bring in. I'm going to be very intrigued to see who Barcelona buy. Lautaro is it Juventus he's playing for, or Inter Milan, one of the Italian clubs, and they're chasing after him. And Barcelona obviously need some striking players to assist Messi, who's not getting any younger. Suarez isn't getting any younger. You've lost Andres Iniesta and Xavi over the last couple of years, and I think it's an aging Barcelona side, but I don't see too many young talent coming through. And there's big problems there at the moment in terms of, is the manager going to be there at the end of the season? That's the big one. They've always been the biggest threat to Real Madrid, but it could well be next season. It's not going to be Barcelona who's the threat. It could be Atletico Madrid or Sevilla.
True. So let's look at relegation. This is where it gets a little bit more interesting here for us, because obviously I'm a big Mallorca fan. I'm a season ticket holder. You used to play for Mallorca. Yeah, it's crossing the fingers. You're right. Right now, we need a miracle, to be perfectly honest. I mean, you're permitted 2 from 4. You've got Mallorca on 32 points, Leganés on 32 points, Alaves on 36 points, who got a draw last night, and Celta Vigo on 36. They're the 4 teams left. From as far as
There's
Mallorca
a big game. Celta Vigo have a big game against, is it Leganés?
We've got Celta Vigo have got Levante.
Levante,
Levante at home, and Espanyol away, which you just probably think Espanyol are down. They'll probably win that. Alaves have got the hardest, I think. They've got Atletico Bilbao away, and they've got
Barcelona. They need the points
at home. Yeah,
Atletico Bilbao need the points because they're going for a UEFA spot, and that's the interesting one. There's still quite a few teams who are looking to try and qualify for UEFA.
Yeah,
and that's what makes it intriguing, and that's why a lot of the games are kicking off simultaneously.
That's right. Listen, you'd hope. Mallorca are playing Granada at home on Thursday, and then they're playing Osasuna away on Sunday. Both teams mid-table, don't really have much to play for, a bit like Levante was the other day when Mallorca won by 2-0. So you basically hope that they could get those 6 points. I just think one of the other teams is going to sneak at least a point. I think Mallorca's left it too late.
I want them to stay up like yourself, but I'm not overly hopeful. I think it's going to be really difficult for them to stay up now. I think they've left it too late. They've had an indifferent season, really, in terms of consistency. If you look, Real Madrid's only lost 3 times this season, and one of them was against Mallorca when they lost 1-0. And that was their first defeat of the season. Crazy.
It was, and I was there, and Mallorca had an absolutely fantastic game that night. They were, the crowd was up and everything else. And I think, with lockdown and obviously crowds not being allowed back, it has affected Mallorca. Mallorca, obviously, we know from last year, from the playoffs, the crowd lifted that team all the way through the playoffs until that final night against Deportivo La Coruña, which was, I think, one of the best nights of football I've ever been to. And I've been to some big games, but that was just an unbelievable atmosphere. And you've got to think about Mallorca, lowest budget in La Liga. They've had about 30 million to spend against, I think it's about 650 million for Barcelona. It's a very small squad. He didn't invest too much money. A lot of the players have been with him since Segunda B. And it's hard for them to step up to that level. It's a big difference, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoke to a lot of my friends like Ian Balaguer and Graham Hunter, and who know the La Liga situation inside out. And, they've said with the players they've got, most of them are Segunda B players and Segunda players.
Right.
So you have to think they've done so well. Well, you were surprised. I was surprised, one, that we went back up so quickly.
Yeah.
And we did say at the time, maybe it's too quickly, but we took it and hoped that they could maybe improve. And I don't think they've had a bad season. They played to their best. They played to their best without a shadow of a doubt. And they've got this wonderful experience of obviously playing against the top clubs and top teams and getting some big results. But overall, the squad wasn't strong enough, and they didn't invest enough money. They didn't have enough money to invest, obviously. But listen, there's always next season. There's always when they come back again. But we're not down yet. We're going to still.
No. Let's look on the bright side, because funny enough, I think the best player this season has been Kubo, the boy they've got on loan from Real Madrid. He's an unbelievable player with an amazing left foot. It'll be a shame if we go down, because obviously we're not going to be able to see him. Well, we'll see him play, but we'll see him play live. He's been great for Mallorca.
Yeah, I love watching him. I watched his first game back there after the lockdown, and he was our best player. Plays on the right-hand side, all left foot, inside, loads of skill and technique. He's going to be a good star, the Japanese player. And I have to say, what are you going to tell me about this young Mexican, the 15-and-a-half-year-old, who's the youngest player to actually play in La Liga? He made his debut.
The Mexican Messi, Luca Romero. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I haven't heard too much about him. I don't know why, because obviously, my son playing in local football here, and I thought I probably would have heard of him if he scored that many goals in the time that he's here. But apparently he was from Mexico. He came over. They were living in Formentera. He used to get on the ferry every week to go and play in Ibiza. Mallorca picked him up. And he's 15 now. He obviously made his debut the other week against Real Madrid, of all people, which is a fantastic thing. And also, Mallorca take him his wing, and I think he gets on very well with the management team. They've obviously he can't sign a contract till he's 16, a professional contract that is. Mallorca have put him up in an apartment with his family. Apparently, he loves the club. You just hope it doesn't. For me, I hope it doesn't go down the Marco Asensio situation where we just didn't get enough money for Asensio. Asensio should have gone for, 4 million it was in the end. I mean, it was ridiculous.
He went 3.5 million. And I told, again, exactly the same. I told every club that I knew this was a really good player, and I was recommending him. And not one of them actually took the time to go across. Liverpool, Manchester United, the whole lot. And then the crazy thing is, 2, 3, 4 years later, when the boys playing really well, Marco Asensio, Liverpool are chasing him, saying we'll offer 50 million when they could have won for 3.5. So
exactly.
You have to say to the clubs, whatever way you run your business, you can certainly improve on it.
Right, let's move away from La Liga, Jerry. Let's look at the first or second division as it is in Spain. Last night, Cadiz got themselves promoted, which is fantastic. Fantastic for them. 69 points. They're above Huesca. In fact, you can compare many from Huesca, Almeria, Zaragoza, Girona, possibly Elche. I don't think Elche are in it, but it's one from one of those four: Girona, Zaragoza, Almeria, and Huesca. 2 more games to go. Do you keep much in touch with La Liga 2 as much as you do?
I look at it every so often, and I looked at Huesca's, who's been sitting in second place now, and they've been fairly consistent. But when Mallorca was in the second division, I watched the results and I watched the consistency every week. And you have to be consistent. And it's not just the consistency. When Mallorca played in the playoffs against Deportivo and we lost 2-0 at La Coruña, you thought, well, it ain't looking good, But then all of a sudden, you get them back, the home form, the fans, the crowd. It's the 12th man. That's what we're missing. Mallorca's
it's true.
Man. If you got the 12th man, then you can do things. So to get to the playoffs is fantastic. And I see Atletico Baleares are now in a position where they could be getting promoted as well. They play Cartagena this weekend. Yeah. I think it's Sunday at the stadium in Malaga.
La Rosaleda, they do. So basically what could happen, which would be really interesting, if, let's hope not, let's hope Mallorca stay up, but if Mallorca do get relegated, next season there is a possibility of 3 teams from the Balearics in the second division of Spanish football, which is actually amazing. I mean, Atletico Baleares, have come from absolutely nowhere. They've got 2 boys on loan from Tottenham, your old club, of course, the Chasoa twins. And they had a boy from Jordan Holsgrove from Reading on loan as well. But unfortunately, Reading they've taken him back, so he can't play in the playoff, which I don't think he's happy about. But what do you do? They're playing Cartagena, who I know are very strong defensively, but this is a one-off game. Normally, what happens in the playoffs is it's a 2-legged affair, like we had with Deportivo before, and like we had when we went up from Segunda B. It's very complicated Segunda B. You've got 4 groups of 20 teams. They're regional teams. One team wins the league but doesn't go up. They play each other as playoffs. If you win, you go up. If you lose, you go into the playoffs with all the teams that finish 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And it's a mess.
So are you telling me that they play Cartagena on Sunday, but they don't play them the following Wednesday?
No. It's a one-off game. This is because of the lockdown. They obviously want to get the leagues finished. Right. So this is a one-off game. Winner takes all. Basically, you win on Sunday, you're up into.
Well, let's keep our fingers crossed for Atletico Baleares. You know, they can pull that one off.
I agree. And then there's Udiabisa. You might remember Udiabisa. Actually, funny enough, in the Copa del Rey this year, we're beating Barcelona by 1-0 with about 10 minutes to go. And then Barcelona scored 2 in the last 10 minutes. Udi had a bit of money put into their club. They've got a very nice stadium. A friend of mine lives in Ibiza, goes and watches them quite a lot. And I saw Udi play Atletico Baleares, funny enough, just before the lockdown. And they beat Baleares by 2-0. And they're a good side. And I think they'll be very close to actually getting up from all the other teams. You know, there's still some good teams amongst them. Even Barcelona's B team, Atletico Madrid's B team, Atletico Bilbao's B team. So it works differently here. If people don't know that a lot of the clubs here have like what we call B teams. They can't go into the division that the team or their main team is. But they can still play up to a point where the other team is, if that makes sense. So it's interesting to watch. I saw Barcelona B's team actually. It's full of youngsters. So there's some interesting teams in this last playoff bit.
Very good. Well, I mean, there's only 3 clubs that have never been relegated out of La Liga, and that's Barcelona, Athletic Bilbao, and Real Madrid. Those 3 are still the only 3 never relegated, and obviously one of the tops. They've all won the league in the past. They've got great history behind them.
Joe, let's finish today on Champions League, because obviously that's the next thing coming up. And I think we forget that Spain has still got 3 teams left. Barcelona, Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid are still in the Champions League. There's a great possibility that one of them is going to win this. When we went into the lockdown, I remember the City Real Madrid game. I think City played Real Madrid off the park, but beating them 2-1 at the Bernabeu. But that's going to be a big game, isn't it? That game, that return.
It is, certainly. And of course, Pep Guardiola is looking at the situation where the Liverpool has won the league title and they've won it really comfortably. So he's going to look for something that he can sort of say, well, look, we've won the Champions League. So there's a lot of clubs, their season is hinging on the Champions League. I mean, the last game I actually commentated on was Wolverhampton Wanderers away to Olympiacos. And the second leg was never played. And Har Wolves got a 1-1 draw in Greece. Was beyond me. Greece, where the Greek team were much better, should have won the match 2 or 3-0 and ended up drawing 1-1. So it's all on the balance, and it's who comes back after the lockup and who comes back best prepared mentally, not just physically, but mentally best prepared, because you're going to be playing behind closed doors, and that's a really strange situation. I've watched a lot of games, and when there's no atmosphere, it can make it a really difficult game.
That's true. Barcelona 1-1 draw with Napoli. That was obviously done in pre-lockdown. They've got the home leg to come. You would probably think Barcelona will get themselves through that, I would have thought. Yeah,
well, Barcelona have in the past always looked like they're going to do something, but the way their form's been recently under Quique Setien, I'm not so sure. It's really, there's an awful lot of pressure they put on Messi to provide and perform. I mean, he's the top goal scorer at the moment on 22 goals, but he's also got about 20 assists as well. If he's not scoring goals, he's creating goals. So they rely heavily on him, and that's not a done deal. None of these are done deals. I think it's wide open at the moment.
And so finally, Atletico Madrid, it's a one-off game they're playing, because obviously they were part of the teams that didn't actually get to play their first leg. They're playing a one-off game against RB Leipzig. Now, that's not an easy game, is it? They're a good team.
No, they're a good team. Leipzig's a good team. That is a difficult game. And again, I worry about who's going to score the goals for Atletico Madrid. They've always been solid at the back. And there's talk of Thomas Partey maybe leaving in the summer. There's a lot of clubs are showing interest in Thomas Partey to head to the Premier League. But no, that's a tough one. I'd have to say a really difficult one to call as well.
It's going to be difficult Champions League, because obviously now they're combining it into a very, very small amount of time. You're literally going to be playing pretty much one game after the other. They're packing it all into August. You're playing I think it's from about the 13th or 14th of August all the way through to the 23rd of August. The finals are at the 23rd of August. So it's, you know, it's all packed into a time. They're all one-legged affairs, so it's going to be difficult.
But that then you have to look at the squads of the players and who's got the strongest squad and who can rotate. And, you know, because if you're playing games every three days, every 3 or 4 days, then you need to have a strong squad. That's why I tipped Real Madrid at the start. I knew they had a better squad and they had more players who were fitter than Barcelona's squad.
Listen, Gerry, great. Thank you very much for giving up your time for us. Really appreciate it. Hopefully we can do this again sometime, yeah?
All right, mate. Take care, Richie. All the best, pal.
All the best, mate. Take care.
Bye.